The wrench slipped from my hands and clattered against the concrete floor of our garage, leaving a streak of grease across my palm. But it wasn't the mechanical failure that caught my attention. It was the unmistakable shade of crimson lipstick smeared across the handle. Lisa hadn't worn red lipstick in 3 years. She said it made her look too aggressive for her HR executive position at Meridian Industries. I picked up the wrench, studying the cosmetic evidence like a detective examining a murder weapon. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, Victor Hammond, a man who'd built a successful engineering consulting business by paying attention to details others missed, and I'd been missing the biggest detail of all. Victor. Lisa's voice cut through the evening air like a blade. She stood in the doorway between our kitchen and garage, designer suitcase in one manicured hand, car keys dangling from the other. Her blonde hair was pulled back in that severe bun she wore when she meant business, and her blue eyes held that familiar cold determination I'd seen her use to terminate employees. "Going somewhere?" I asked, setting the wrench down on my workbench with deliberate care. My voice carried none of the surprise I felt. 20 years of marriage had taught me the value of emotional poker. "I'm spending the weekend with Ethan." The words came out flat, matter-of-fact, as if she were announcing a dentist appointment. No explanation, no apology, no attempt at deception, just brutal honesty wrapped in casual cruelty. Ethan Corbin. Her ex-boyfriend from college. The same Ethan who'd been sniffing around our social circles ever since he'd moved back to Millbrook 6 months ago to head up R&D at Corbin Dynamics. The same Ethan who drove a custom Tesla Model S and still acted like the campus big shot he'd been 2 decades ago. "Have fun," I replied, wiping my hands on an old shop rag. The casualness of my response seemed to catch her off guard. She'd probably expected screaming, pleading, maybe even violence. Instead, I walked to my workbench and pulled out a manila envelope I'd been keeping in the top drawer for 3 weeks. "What's that?" she asked, her voice losing some of its earlier confidence. I handed her the envelope without ceremony. "Divorce papers, already signed on my end. Your lawyer can contact mine next week." Lisa's perfectly composed mask cracked like ice on a warm pond. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. For the first time in months, I saw genuine emotion flicker across her features, shock, followed quickly by something that looked almost like fear. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "Dead serious." I leaned against the workbench, crossing my arms. "You want to spend weekends with Ethan? Fine, but you won't be doing it as my wife." The color drained from her face. "Victor, we need to talk about this. You're being rash." "Rash?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Lisa, I've known about your little arrangement for 2 months. The late-night texts, the mysterious conference calls, the new lingerie I never see you wear. You think I'm stupid?" She straightened, her corporate training kicking in. "This doesn't have to be ugly, Victor. We can handle this like adults." "Oh, it won't be ugly," I said, my voice carrying a promise she didn't understand yet. "It'll be very, very clean." Lisa stared at me for a long moment, searching my face for something, weakness maybe, or the desperate husband she'd expected to find. When she didn't see it, she turned on her heel and walked toward her BMW. "I'll be back Sunday night," she called over her shoulder. "No," I said quietly, but my voice carried across the garage. "You won't." She paused at her car door, looking back at me with confusion and something else. The first hint of real fear I'd seen from her in years. As her taillights disappeared down Maple Street, I returned to my workbench and opened the hidden safe I'd installed behind my tool cabinet. Inside were 3 items that would change everything. Lisa's old burner phone that she'd carelessly left in her gym bag, a USB drive containing 6 months of downloaded data from our home computer, and a leather-bound notebook filled with my careful observations and plans. I'd spent my entire career solving complex engineering problems by breaking them down into manageable components. Marriage, I'd discovered, wasn't much different. And like any good engineer, I'd been documenting the failure points for quite some time. My phone buzzed with a text from Sam Morrison, my old college roommate and current private investigator. She just drove past my office. Tesla's already in the Riverside Inn parking lot. You ready for this? I typed back. The weekend clause just went into effect. Sam had been helping me prepare for this moment ever since I'd first suspected Lisa's infidelity. While she'd been planning her romantic getaway, I'd been planning something far more comprehensive. She thought she was starting a new chapter of her life. She had no idea she was walking into the final pages of her old one. Outside, old Mr. Oates was watering his prized rose bushes, but I could tell he was really watching my house. The 70-year-old retired postal worker had elevated neighborhood gossip to an art form. By morning, half of Millbrook would know that Lisa Hammond had left with a suitcase on a Friday night. Perfect. Phase 1 was already in motion. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon, the good stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion, and settled into my leather chair. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. But tonight, I wanted to savor this moment. The last few hours of peace before I systematically dismantled the life Lisa thought she was building with Ethan Corbin. She'd said she was spending the weekend with her ex. What she didn't know was that by Sunday, she'd discover exactly what kind of man she'd married, and what happened when that man decided to stop playing nice. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made Millbrook look like a postcard. I was up at 6, coffee brewing, laptop open on the kitchen table where Lisa used to eat her yogurt and granola while scrolling through social media. The irony of using her abandoned breakfast spot to plan her destruction wasn't lost on me. Sam arrived at 7 sharp, carrying a box of donuts and wearing his trademark shit-eating grin. At 42, he still looked like the college linebacker he'd been, though his dark hair now showed threads of silver and his waistline had expanded with age and too many stakeouts fueled by fast food. "Morning, sunshine," he said, setting the donuts on the counter. "How'd you sleep?" "Like a baby," I replied, which was true. I'd slept better last night than I had in months. "Coffee? You know it." Sam poured himself a mug and joined me at the table. "So our lovebirds checked into the Riverside Inn at 9:15 last night. Room 237, king bed, champagne service. Ethan paid cash, probably thought that would keep things quiet." I opened Lisa's burner phone, a cheap Android she'd bought 3 months ago and thought she'd hidden so cleverly in her gym bag. Let's see what they've been saying to each other. The text thread between Lisa and Ethan was a masterpiece of modern infidelity. It started innocuous enough. "Great seeing you at the Morrison party, and we should catch up over coffee," but quickly escalated into something that would make a divorce lawyer's eyes light up like slot machines. "Jesus," Sam whistled, reading over my shoulder. "She really doesn't hold back, does she?" The messages were explicit, detailed, and utterly damning. But more than that, they revealed a level of contempt for me that was almost breathtaking. Lisa and Ethan didn't just discuss their physical relationship, they mocked my appearance, my business, even my cooking. Ethan had nicknamed me the mechanic because of the time I spent in my garage, and Lisa had apparently found this hilarious. "Look at this one," I said, pointing to a message from 2 weeks ago. "Victor's working late again, probably playing with his little tools. Real men don't need to hide in garages." "What a charming couple," Sam said dryly. "But this is good for us." Really good. No judge in Maine is going to look kindly on this level of disrespect. I scrolled further back, finding the planning messages for their weekend getaway. They'd been organizing this for 3 weeks, discussing everything from champagne preferences to which positions they wanted to try. But buried in the romantic logistics was something far more interesting: references to Ethan's work situation. "Sam, look at this." I highlighted a message from Ethan. "Board meeting went bad. Jenkins is asking questions about the Morrison contract. Need to lay low for a while." Sam leaned closer. "What's the Morrison contract?" I pulled up my laptop and opened a browser. Ethan's company, Corbin Dynamics, Landed a huge municipal contract 6 months ago. $50 million to upgrade the city's water treatment facilities. But there were rumors about bid irregularities. You think our boy Ethan might have cut some corners? I think Ethan Corbin is about to have much bigger problems than a messy divorce. I opened the USB drive I'd been filling with data from our home computer. Lisa had been careless about her digital security, using our shared laptop for both personal and work communications. She's been helping him. The evidence was all there, hidden in Lisa's email drafts and deleted browser history. As an HR executive, she'd had access to employee records, salary information, and confidential company data. She'd been feeding information to Ethan about Meridian Industries' bidding strategies, giving Corbin Dynamics an unfair advantage in contract competitions. Holy shit, Sam breathed. This isn't just adultery. This is corporate espionage. It gets better. I pulled up a video file I discovered in Lisa's cloud storage. She recorded some of their encounters. I guess she thought it was romantic. The video was grainy, clearly shot on a phone, but the audio was crystal clear. Lisa and Ethan, in what looked like his office, engaged in activities that would definitely violate Corbin Dynamics' employee handbook. But more importantly, they were talking business. Specifically, they were discussing how to manipulate the Morrison contract to maximize Ethan's bonus. "This is nuclear," Sam said. "We could destroy both of them with this." "We're going to do exactly that." I closed the laptop and stood up. But not all at once. I want them to suffer slowly, publicly. I want everyone in this town to know exactly what kind of people they are. Sam grinned. "I love it when you get devious. What's the plan?" I walked to the window and looked out at Maple Street. Mrs. Patterson was walking her poodle, probably hoping to catch a glimpse of drama at the Hammond house. Mr. Oates was already positioned at his mailbox, though the mail wouldn't arrive for 3 hours. The neighborhood gossip network was in full surveillance mode. "Phase 1 is already complete," I said. "Lisa's absence is noted and will be discussed. By tonight, half the town will know she left with a suitcase. And Phase 2? Phase 2 begins tomorrow when our happy couple returns from their romantic getaway. I'm going to give them exactly what they want, a chance to be together publicly. They'll just discover that being together comes with a price they weren't expecting to pay." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a number I hadn't called in months. "Hey, Julia? It's Victor. I need to ask you something about Lisa." Julia Martinez was Lisa's best friend and closest confidant. If anyone knew the details of Lisa's affair, it would be Julia. More importantly, Julia was married to Tom Martinez, who happened to be on the city council and had voted on the Morrison contract. "Victor, how are you? Is Lisa around?" "Actually, that's what I wanted to ask you about. She said she was spending the weekend with you, but when I called your house this morning, Tom said you were visiting your sister in Portland." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 10 seconds. When Julia finally spoke, her voice had lost its cheerful tone. "Oh, maybe there was some confusion. You know how Lisa gets her plans mixed up sometimes." "Right," I said, injecting just the right amount of concern into my voice. "Well, if you hear from her, could you have her call me?" I'm a little worried. After I hung up, Sam was shaking his head in admiration. "You magnificent bastard. You just confirmed that Julia knows about the affair and has been covering for Lisa." "Better than that," I said. "Julia's going to spend the rest of the day trying to figure out how much I know and whether she should warn Lisa. Either way, she's going to make mistakes." My phone rang almost immediately. Julia calling back. "Victor, I just remembered. Lisa mentioned something about a work retreat. Maybe that's where she is? A work retreat on the weekend? That seems unusual. You know corporate life. They work people so hard these days." "Right. Well, thanks for the help, Julia. I'm sure she'll turn up." I hung up and looked at Sam. She's panicking. Give it 2 hours, and she'll be calling Lisa to warn her that I'm asking questions. And when Lisa gets that call? She's going to realize that her perfect plan isn't as perfect as she thought. She's going to start making desperate decisions. And desperate people make mistakes. Sam finished his coffee and stood up. I'm going to position myself at the Riverside Inn, get some photos of our happy couple. What are you going to do? I smiled, feeling the familiar satisfaction I got when a complex engineering problem finally started yielding to systematic analysis. I'm going to pay a visit to Corbin Dynamics. It's time I introduced myself to my wife's boyfriend. On a Saturday? Ethan's the type who works weekends to impress the board. Besides, I have a business proposition for him. One he won't be able to refuse. As Sam left, I returned to the kitchen table and opened Lisa's burner phone one more time. There was a new message, sent just 20 minutes ago. Can't wait to see you this morning, baby. Last night was incredible. I smiled and typed a response. Victor knows. We need to talk. Then I turned off the phone and slipped it into my pocket. By the time Lisa got Julia's warning call, she'd already be in full panic mode. And when she tried to contact Ethan to discuss their crisis, she'd discover that her secret phone had mysteriously stopped working. The weekend was just getting started, and already the foundation of their perfect plan was beginning to crack. By Sunday night, the entire structure would come crashing down. But first, I had a business meeting to attend. Corbin Dynamics occupied a gleaming steel and glass building on the outskirts of Millbrook's modest downtown, the kind of modern architecture that screamed, "We're more important than we actually are." I parked my F-150 between a BMW and a Mercedes in the visitors section, noting how my work truck looked perfectly at home among the executive vehicles. Sometimes being underestimated was an advantage. The lobby was all marble and chrome, designed to impress clients and intimidate competitors. Behind the reception desk sat a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her nameplate read, Greta Morrison. "Can I help you?" she asked, looking up from her computer screen. "Victor Hammond to see Ethan Corbin. I don't have an appointment, but I think he'll want to hear what I have to say." Greta's eyebrows rose slightly. "Hammond Engineering? I know your work. You consulted on the water treatment upgrades last year." "That's right." I leaned against the reception desk, adopting a casual, friendly demeanor. "Actually, that's part of what I wanted to discuss with Mr. Corbin. I have some information that might be valuable to him." Something flickered in Greta's eyes. Interest, maybe, or recognition. "Let me see if he's available." While she made the call, I studied the company directory mounted on the wall behind her desk. Ethan Corbin, Head of Research and Development, 3rd floor, corner office. Below his name was a list of his recent achievements, including the Morrison contract that had made him a local business celebrity. "Mr. Corbin will see you," Greta said, hanging up the phone. "3rd floor, suite 312. The elevator is just around the corner." "Thanks, Greta. By the way, any relation to the Morrison contract?" Her smile was thin but knowing. My late husband was city engineer for 37 years. He would have had some interesting opinions about that particular project. I filed that information away as I headed for the elevator. Greta Morrison wasn't just a receptionist. She was a potential ally with her own reasons to dislike Ethan Corbin. The 3rd floor was quieter than I'd expected for a Saturday, but I could hear voices coming from behind several closed doors. Dedicated employees working weekends, or nervous executives trying to stay ahead of problems. In Ethan's case, probably both. Suite 312 was indeed a corner office, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Millbrook's modest skyline. Ethan Corbin stood with his back to the door, talking on his phone in a voice that carried just enough volume to ensure anyone passing by would know he was handling important business. "I don't care what Jenkins thinks," he was saying. "The Morrison contract is solid, and any investigation will prove that. We won the bid fair and square." He turned as I knocked on the open door, and I got my first close look at the man who'd been sleeping with my wife. Ethan was tall and lean, with the kind of artificially perfect appearance that suggested regular visits to expensive salons and gyms. His dark hair was styled with mathematical precision, and his clothes probably cost more than most people made in a week. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone, then hung up and extended his hand. "Victor Hammond. I've heard a lot about you. I'll bet you have." I shook his hand, noting his firm grip and direct eye contact. Ethan was used to being the alpha male in any room. "Thanks for seeing me on short notice." "Always happy to meet a fellow businessman. Please have a seat." He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. "What can I do for you?" I settled into the chair and looked around his office, noting the expensive artwork, the awards mounted on the walls, and the framed photos of Ethan with various local politicians and business leaders. No family photos, I noticed. No personal touches that might suggest vulnerability or emotional attachment. "I understand you've been having some questions raised about the Morrison contract," I said without preamble. Ethan's friendly expression didn't change, but I caught a slight tightening around his eyes. "Where did you hear that?" "Small town, big ears. But that's not why I'm here." I pulled out a manila folder I'd prepared that morning. "I'm here because I think we can help each other." "I'm listening." I opened the folder and slid a document across his desk. "Hammond Engineering has been doing some analysis of the municipal infrastructure projects awarded over the past 2 years. There are some interesting patterns in the bidding data." Ethan picked up the document and scanned it quickly. What he was looking at was a genuine engineering analysis I'd prepared over the past month, showing statistical anomalies in contract awards that suggested possible bid manipulation. It was thorough, professional, and absolutely damning. "This is impressive work," he said carefully, "but I'm not sure what it has to do with me. It has everything to do with you, Ethan. And with my wife." The mask slipped. For just a moment, Ethan's confident facade cracked, and I saw the fear underneath. He knew that I knew, but he didn't know how much I knew or what I planned to do with the information. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." I leaned back in my chair, completely relaxed. "Lisa's been feeding you inside information from Meridian Industries. You've been using that information to manipulate contract bids, and both of you have been stupid enough to document your activities in writing." Ethan set the document down and steepled his fingers, trying to regain control of the conversation. "That's a very serious accusation, Victor. Do you have any proof?" I pulled out my phone and played a 10-second audio clip from one of Lisa's recorded encounters. Ethan's voice came through clearly. "Once we get the Morrison bonus, we can afford to be more careful. Maybe even go public with this relationship." The color drained from Ethan's face. "Where did you get that? Does it matter? The question is what we're going to do about it." I put my phone away and leaned forward. "Here's what I'm thinking. You're going to need an ally when the city council starts asking hard questions about your contracts. Someone with credibility and expertise who can vouch for your work. And you're volunteering to be that ally? For the right price? Yes." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. I could see him trying to work out the angles, figure out what I really wanted. The idea that I might be willing to overlook his affair in exchange for business advantages was clearly something he could understand and respect. "What kind of price are we talking about?" he asked finally. "A partnership." Hammond Engineering becomes the exclusive consulting firm for all Corbin Dynamics municipal projects. 50-50 split on consulting fees, my name on all the proposals, full access to your client list. That's substantial. So is what I'm offering in return. My silence, my professional endorsement, and my wife. Ethan's eyebrows shot up. "Your wife?" "Let's not pretend this is just about business, Ethan. You want Lisa, and frankly, I'm tired of being married to a woman who thinks so little of me. But I want something in return for my cooperation." I could see the wheels turning in Ethan's head. This was a language he understood. Transactional, cynical, purely self-interested. The idea that I might be willing to trade my wife for business advantages fit perfectly with his worldview. This is a very unusual proposition, Victor. These are unusual circumstances. But I think we can make this work for everyone involved. I stood up and straightened my jacket. Think about it over the weekend. We can finalize the details next week. What about Lisa? Does she know about this arrangement? I smiled. Lisa's going to learn a lot of things very soon, but for now, why don't you focus on enjoying your romantic getaway? I understand the Riverside Inn has excellent room service. The look of shock on Ethan's face was worth the entire drive to his office. He hadn't expected me to know where they were staying, and the casual way I'd mentioned it told him that I knew far more than he'd realized. I'll be in touch, I said, heading for the door. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. As I waited for the elevator, I could hear Ethan frantically dialing his phone. By the time I reached the lobby, he'd probably be trying to call Lisa to warn her that their secret was out. But Lisa's burner phone was still in my pocket, turned off and useless. Greta looked up as I passed her desk. How did your meeting go, Mr. Hammond? Very productive, I think, Mr. Corbin and I are going to be working together very closely in the future. I'm sure he'll appreciate having someone he can trust. The irony in her voice was unmistakable. Greta Morrison knew exactly what kind of man Ethan Corbin was, and she'd just watched me walk into his office with information that could destroy him. She was smart enough to realize that this wasn't a social call. Greta, can I ask you something? Off the record? She glanced around the empty lobby and nodded. Your husband was city engineer when the Morrison contract was awarded. Did he ever mention any concerns about the bidding process? Her smile was sharp as a blade. My husband mentioned a lot of things, Mr. Hammond. He kept very detailed records of everything that crossed his desk. Very detailed. Those records wouldn't happen to still exist, would they? They might. For the right person, someone who might be interested in ensuring that the truth comes to light. I handed her my business card. I think we should have coffee sometime this week. I have a feeling we have a lot to discuss. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a text from Sam. Lovebirds just had a screaming match in the hotel parking lot. Ethan's trying to check out early, but Lisa won't get in the car. This is better than cable. I typed back, Phase 2 is ahead of schedule. Get photos of everything. The weekend was far from over, but already Lisa and Ethan's perfect romantic getaway was turning into a nightmare. And I hadn't even started the real revenge yet. That would begin tomorrow, when they returned to Millbrook and discovered that their secret affair had become the town's newest entertainment. Sunday morning brought rain and the sound of my phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. I'd turned off the ringer Saturday night, but the vibrations were persistent enough to wake me from the best sleep I'd had in months. 12 missed calls from Lisa, 8 from Julia, and 3 from numbers I didn't recognize. I made coffee and settled into my kitchen chair before checking the voicemails. Lisa's progression from confusion to anger to panic was almost musical in its escalation. Victor, my phone isn't working right. Call me at the hotel. That was from 9:47 p.m. Saturday. What the hell did you say to Ethan? He's acting crazy, saying you know everything. This is ridiculous. 11:23 p.m. We're coming home. We need to talk about this like adults. 6:15 a.m. Sunday. The final message, left just 20 minutes ago, was pure desperation. Victor, please. Whatever you think you know, whatever Ethan told you, we can work this out. Don't do anything stupid. Too late for that, I thought, deleting the messages. Sam arrived at 8 with donuts and a shit-eating grin that told me he'd had an entertaining weekend. You should have seen them yesterday afternoon, he said, settling into the chair across from me. Ethan was practically dragging Lisa to the car, but she kept pulling away. Half the hotel staff was watching from the windows. Did you get photos? Better. Sam pulled out his camera and scrolled through the images. Look at this sequence. The photos told a story of relationship meltdown in real time. Ethan and Lisa arguing beside his Tesla, her pointing an accusing finger at his chest, him throwing his hands up in frustration. Then Lisa storming back toward the hotel while Ethan stood alone in the parking lot, looking like a man who'd just realized his perfect plan was falling apart. They never did check out, Sam continued. Spent Saturday night in separate rooms. Ethan tried to leave this morning around 6, but Lisa was waiting by his car. They argued for another hour before she finally got in. Where are they now? Lisa's at Julia's house. Ethan went home, but he's been pacing around his condo like a caged animal. I think your little business meeting rattled him more than he expected. I poured Sam a cup of coffee and opened my laptop. Time for phase 3. You ready to make some calls? What kind of calls? The kind that turn whispered rumors into confirmed gossip. I pulled up a contact list I'd been building for the past month. Neighbors, co-workers, social acquaintances, anyone who might be interested in the dramatic collapse of the Hammond marriage. We're going to give this town exactly what it loves most, a scandal with all the dirty details. We spent the next 2 hours making carefully orchestrated phone calls. Not accusations or direct statements, but concerned inquiries and worried observations that would plant seeds of gossip in fertile ground. I called Tom Martinez, Julia's husband and city council member. Tom, I'm sorry to bother you on a Sunday, but I'm trying to reach Lisa. Julia mentioned she might be staying with you folks this weekend. She's here now, actually, Tom said, his voice carrying the strained politeness of a man caught in the middle of someone else's drama. She and Julia are having some kind of crisis meeting in the living room. Nothing serious, I hope? I'm staying out of it, Victor. But maybe you should come over and talk to your wife. Perfect. Tom Martinez was now officially aware that the Hammond marriage was in trouble, and his wife was somehow involved in the crisis. As a city council member, Tom would be particularly interested in any scandal involving municipal contracts or local business leaders. Sam called his contacts at the police department, casually mentioning that he'd been hired to conduct surveillance on a cheating spouse case that involved prominent local figures. He didn't name names, but in a town the size of Millbrook, it wouldn't take long for people to connect the dots. By noon, we'd planted enough seeds to ensure that the gossip network would be running at full capacity. All we had to do now was wait for Lisa and Ethan to make their next move. They didn't disappoint. At 1:30, my phone rang. Lisa, calling from Julia's house. Victor, we need to meet. Somewhere private where we can talk about this situation rationally. What situation is that, Lisa? Don't play games with me. Ethan told me about your meeting yesterday, about your proposition. That's not like you, Victor. You're not a vindictive person. I almost laughed. After 20 years of marriage, Lisa still didn't understand who she'd been living with. She'd mistaken patience for weakness, careful planning for passivity. She was about to learn the difference. You're right, I said. I'm not vindictive. I'm thorough. Where do you want to meet? The Harbor Light. Back booth. 1 hour. The Harbor Light was Millbrook's oldest bar, a dimly lit establishment that catered to blue-collar workers and anyone else who preferred their drinking without pretense. It was also the unofficial headquarters of the town's gossip network, staffed by bartenders who'd been collecting secrets for decades. I'll be there, I said. After hanging up, I looked at Sam. She wants to meet at the Harbor Light. Jesus, she really doesn't understand how this works, does she? That place is like broadcasting your business on the local news. That's exactly why she chose it. Lisa thinks she's being smart, meeting in a public place where I won't make a scene. She doesn't realize that having our confrontation in front of the Harbor Light's regular crowd is like taking out a full-page ad in the newspaper. I showered and put on my best jeans and a clean flannel shirt, the uniform of a working man who didn't need to impress anyone. Then I drove to the Harbor Light, noting the unusually full parking lot for a Sunday afternoon. Word was already spreading. Lisa was waiting in the back booth, still wearing the expensive outfit she'd packed for her romantic weekend. She looked tired and stressed, her perfect makeup unable to hide the strain around her eyes. Across from her sat Julia Martinez, looking like a woman who'd rather be anywhere else in the world. I slid into the booth across from them, noting how conversations at nearby tables grew quieter. We had an audience, which was exactly what I wanted. "Hello, ladies. How was your weekend?" Lisa's jaw tightened. "Cut the crap, Victor. What do you want?" "I want a lot of things, Lisa. I want honesty, which I haven't gotten from you in months. I want respect, which you've been giving to another man. And I want a divorce, which I think we can all agree is the best solution for everyone involved." "This doesn't have to be ugly," Julia interjected, trying to play peacemaker. "You're both reasonable people." "Are we?" I turned to Julia with a smile that made her shrink back in her seat. "Because I think reasonable people don't help their friends commit adultery. Reasonable people don't lie to their neighbors and cover up affairs that involve corporate espionage." The color drained from Julia's face. "Corporate espionage? Victor, what are you talking about?" "Ask your husband about the Morrison contract, Julia. Ask him about the bidding irregularities that his engineering department flagged, but somehow got overlooked. Then ask Lisa how she happened to know so much about Meridian Industries' bidding strategy." Lisa leaned forward, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You're bluffing. You don't have any proof of anything." I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table between us. "Would you like me to play some of your recorded conversations with Ethan? I'm sure the folks at the bar would find them educational." The threat hit home. Lisa's face went white, and Julia looked like she might be sick. Around us, I could feel the attention of the other patrons, sensing drama even if they couldn't hear our quiet conversation. "What do you want?" Lisa asked again, but this time her voice carried defeat instead of defiance. "I want you to understand that your little affair isn't just going to cost you our marriage. It's going to cost you your career, your reputation, and probably your freedom when the FBI starts investigating municipal contract fraud." "The FBI?" Julia squeaked. "Corporate espionage involving federal infrastructure funds is a federal crime, Julia. When this comes out, and it will come out, Lisa's going to need a very good lawyer. So is Ethan." I stood up, leaving my phone on the table. "But here's the thing, ladies. I'm not unreasonable. Lisa, if you want to be with Ethan, I won't stand in your way. All I want is a clean divorce and fair division of assets. No alimony, no extended legal battles, just a quick, quiet end to our marriage." "And if I don't agree?" I picked up my phone and scrolled to a video file. "Then tomorrow morning I start making some very interesting phone calls. The city council, the FBI's white-collar crime division, and maybe a few local reporters who might be interested in a story about corruption in municipal contracting." Lisa stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to calculate the odds, figure out if I was bluffing or if I really had the evidence to destroy her. The problem was, she'd never learned to read me properly. She'd spent so many years dismissing me as boring and predictable that she'd never noticed how carefully I observed everything around me. "I need time to think," she said finally. "You have until tomorrow morning. After that, I start making calls." I left them sitting in the booth, two women who'd just realized they'd badly underestimated the man they'd been trying to manipulate. As I walked toward the door, I could feel the eyes of every patron in the bar following me, and I could hear the whispered conversation starting before I'd even reached the parking lot. By evening, everyone in Millbrook would know that Victor Hammond had confronted his cheating wife in the harbor light, and that the confrontation had involved serious accusations about criminal activity. The details would be garbled and exaggerated, but the core message would be clear. The Hammond marriage was over, and it was going to be messy. My phone buzzed with a text from Sam. "Ethan just left his condo with 2 suitcases. Looks like he's planning a trip." I typed back, "Follow him. If he's running, I want to know where." The weekend was almost over, but the real fireworks were just beginning. Lisa and Ethan had spent 2 days trying to figure out how to manage a crisis they didn't understand. Tomorrow, they'd discover that their crisis was about to become a catastrophe, and I was going to enjoy every minute of it. Monday morning arrived with the kind of gray, overcast sky that made Millbrook look like a town under siege. I was up early, coffee in hand, watching from my kitchen window as the neighborhood came to life. Mrs. Patterson walked her poodle past my house 3 times, twice her normal route, and Mr. Oates had positioned himself at his mailbox with a cup of coffee and the patience of a man expecting entertainment. The show was about to begin. At 8 sharp, I called Greta Morrison at Corbin Dynamics. She answered on the first ring, her voice crisp and professional. "Mr. Hammond, I was hoping I'd hear from you today. I think it's time we had that coffee, Greta. Are you free this morning?" "I can be. Shall we say 9 o'clock at Millbrook Cafe?" "Perfect. And Greta, you might want to bring those records we discussed." Millbrook Cafe occupied the ground floor of a renovated Victorian house on Main Street, the kind of place where business deals were made over blueberry muffins and the waitresses had been serving the same customers for decades. I arrived 5 minutes early and chose a corner table where we could talk privately. Greta arrived precisely at 9, carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it had seen decades of use. She was dressed in a simple gray suit, her graying hair pulled back in that same practical bun, but her eyes held a sharpness that suggested she'd been looking forward to this meeting. "Thank you for coming," I said as she settled into the chair across from me. "Thank you for calling. I've been waiting a long time for someone to ask the right questions about Ethan Corbin." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. My husband kept copies of everything: correspondence, memos, technical specifications, financial records. He was old school that way, believed in paper trails and documentation. I opened the folder and found myself looking at a treasure trove of evidence. Internal memos questioning the Morrison contract specifications, correspondence between city engineers and Corbin Dynamics that showed suspicious advance knowledge of competing bids, and financial records that revealed payments to consultants who didn't seem to exist. "This is incredible, Greta. Why didn't your husband report these irregularities when he first noticed them?" Her smile was bitter. "He tried. But Ethan Corbin has friends on the city council, and my husband was 2 years from retirement. He was told to focus on his own work and let others worry about contract oversight. But he kept investigating anyway. Harold was an engineer, Mr. Hammond. He couldn't ignore problems just because they were politically inconvenient. He spent his last 2 years documenting everything he could find. I studied the financial records more closely. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for: inflated consulting fees, payments to shell companies, and a complex web of subcontracts that seemed designed to obscure the true cost of the project. "How much money are we talking about? Conservative estimate?" Corbin Dynamics overcharged the city by at least $2 million on the Morrison contract alone, and that's just one project. My phone buzzed with a text from Sam. "Ethan's at the airport. Looks like he's trying to catch a flight to Boston." I showed the message to Greta, who shook her head in disgust. "Running away." Just like I expected. "Not if I can help it." I pulled out my own phone and dialed a number I'd memorized over the weekend. "Detective Morrison? This is Victor Hammond. I have some information about municipal contract fraud that I think you'll find interesting." 20 minutes later, Detective Ray Morrison, Greta's nephew and a 15-year veteran of the state police, was sitting at our table studying his aunt's documentation with the focused attention of a man who'd been waiting for exactly this kind of evidence. "This is solid," he said finally. "More than solid. This is enough to launch a full investigation into Corbin Dynamics and anyone else involved in the contracting process." "Including my wife," I said. Detective Morrison looked up from the files. "Your wife?" I pulled out Lisa's burner phone and scrolled to the text messages. "Lisa Hammond, HR executive at Meridian Industries. She's been feeding inside information to Ethan Corbin for months, helping him manipulate contract bids." The detective read through several messages, his expression growing grimmer with each one. "Corporate espionage, conspiracy to defraud, possibly racketeering if we can prove this was part of a larger pattern." "There's more." I showed him the video files Lisa had recorded. They documented their relationship, including conversations about their business arrangements. Detective Morrison watched 30 seconds of video before closing the phone. Jesus Christ. They recorded themselves discussing criminal activity. Criminals aren't usually known for their intelligence, Greta observed dryly. My phone rang. Lisa, calling from what sounded like a very noisy, very public place. Victor, we need to talk. Right now. I'm a little busy at the moment, Lisa. Ethan's at the airport. He's trying to leave town and he's blaming everything on me. He says I seduced him, that I was the one pushing for the business arrangements. You have to stop him. I looked across the table at Detective Morrison, who was already reaching for his radio. Where exactly is Ethan right now? Gate 12 at Portland International. His flight leaves in 40 minutes. Victor, please. If he runs, I'm going to take the blame for everything. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to commit federal crimes with your boyfriend. Don't do this. Please. I know I hurt you, but don't let him destroy my life out of spite. The desperation in her voice was almost pathetic. Lisa had finally realized that her perfect plan was collapsing, and her lover was abandoning her to face the consequences alone. But it was too late for appeals to mercy or pleas for forgiveness. Your life was destroyed the moment you decided to betray our marriage and commit crimes with Ethan Corbin. I'm just making sure the truth comes to light. I hung up and looked at Detective Morrison. You might want to make that call to airport security. While the detective coordinated Ethan's arrest, I walked outside to call Sam. The morning had turned into exactly the kind of public spectacle I'd been planning, and I wanted to make sure we captured every moment. Sam, where are you? Following the circus. Lisa's at the airport, screaming at airline security. Julia's with her, trying to calm her down. It's like watching a soap opera. Get photos of everything. This is going to be the story everyone in town talks about for the next 10 years. Already on it. But Victor, you might want to get down here. Lisa's telling anyone who'll listen that you set this whole thing up, that you're trying to frame her for crimes she didn't commit. I smiled. Lisa was finally showing her true colors in public, revealing the selfish, manipulative woman she'd always been beneath the perfect corporate facade. Every word she spoke in her own defense was actually making her look worse. Let her talk, I said. The more she says, the deeper she digs her own grave. By noon, Ethan Corbin was in custody, charged with conspiracy to defraud and awaiting transfer to federal detention. Lisa was being questioned by FBI agents who'd been called in to investigate the municipal contract fraud. And I was sitting in my kitchen, fielding phone calls from reporters who'd gotten wind of the biggest scandal in Millbrook's recent history. The local newspaper wanted a statement about my wife's arrest. The Portland television stations were sending crews to cover the story. And the FBI had scheduled an interview with me for later in the afternoon, though Detective Morrison had assured me I was being treated as a witness rather than a suspect. My phone buzzed with a text from Julia Martinez. This is all your fault. You destroyed two good people because you couldn't handle your wife leaving you. I typed back, I didn't destroy anyone. I just documented their crimes and turned the evidence over to law enforcement. If they're destroyed, they did it to themselves. The response came immediately. You're a vindictive bastard. No, Julia. I'm an engineer. I solve problems by analyzing systems and fixing failures. Lisa and Ethan were a system failure. I just implemented the appropriate corrective measures. By evening, the story had spread beyond Millbrook. The Portland Press-Herald ran a front-page article about municipal corruption and corporate espionage. The television news featured interviews with city council members expressing shock and promising full investigations. And social media was buzzing with speculation about how deep the corruption went and who else might be involved. I sat in my leather chair, bourbon in hand, watching the local news coverage of my wife's arrest. Lisa looked haggard and desperate as she was led away in handcuffs, her perfect corporate image finally stripped away to reveal the criminal underneath. The reporter was interviewing neighbors about the Hammond family, and Mr. Oates was clearly enjoying his moment in the spotlight. I always knew something wasn't right over there, he told the camera. Victor's a good man, works hard, keeps to himself. But that wife of his, always putting on airs, acting like she was too good for the neighborhood. Turns out she was just a common criminal. My phone rang. Sam, calling from the bar where he was undoubtedly holding court with his version of the day's events. Victor, you magnificent son of a bitch, you actually did it. You destroyed them both without breaking a single law. I didn't destroy anyone, Sam. I just gave them enough rope to hang themselves. Same result. Lisa's looking at 5 to 10 years in federal prison. Ethan's probably going to get even more time since he was the ringleader, and you're sitting pretty with a clean divorce and your reputation intact. Better than intact. I'm the wronged husband who discovered his wife's crimes and did his civic duty by reporting them to law enforcement. I'm practically a folk hero. So what's next? You going to write a book? Do the talk show circuit? I took a sip of bourbon and smiled. I'm going to do what I've always done, Sam. I'm going to work on my engineering projects, mind my own business, and enjoy the peace and quiet of living alone. No revenge fantasies? No dreams of rubbing their faces in it when they get out of prison? Revenge fantasies are for people who don't have the patience to plan real revenge. Lisa and Ethan will spend the next decade in federal prison, thinking about how their greed and arrogance destroyed their lives. That's better than any fantasy I could dream up. After hanging up, I walked out to my garage and picked up the wrench that had started this whole chain of events. The lipstick stain was still there, a reminder of the moment I'd realized my marriage was over. But now it seemed less like evidence of betrayal and more like a memento of victory. Lisa had thought she was so clever, planning her perfect affair with her perfect lover. She'd underestimated the quiet man she'd married, mistaking his patience for weakness and his careful planning for passivity. She'd never realized that the same methodical approach that made me a successful engineer could be applied to solving more personal problems. The weekend clause had been simple. She wanted to spend weekends with her ex, so I'd given her exactly what she wanted. She just hadn't understood that getting what you want sometimes comes with consequences you never expected. I turned off the garage lights and headed back to the house, already planning the renovations I'd make now that I had the place to myself. New kitchen, updated bathroom, maybe a workshop in the basement where I could work on projects without anyone complaining about the noise. For the first time in months, I was looking forward to the future.